Hey, good morning. Yeah, well, unmute me and then I'll say that all again. Like that. Hey, good morning. Awesome. So good to see you today. So we are gathering this day, coming together, and we're going to sing, like we do. We're going to sing Hope's Song. To shine the light when darkness seems too often to thrive. We are going to realize that we are signals of joy in desperate places. And we're going to respond to God's love as it calls us into a more excellent way. So let us worship this day. As Eric starts.
Just a stranger on a bus, trying to make
So, in his revealingly titled book, that was anticlimactic. In his revealingly titled book, Let Your Life Speak, writer and speaker and activist Parker Palmer alleges that the church's view of vocation, which, let me just unpack that if anybody needs me to, but which is a strong sense of purpose or call in maybe your work and your career or just in what you are and do. But that the church's view of vocation is, quote, an act of violence toward ourselves, in which a vision is forced on the self from without rather than grown from within. He says, I must listen to my life and try to understand what it is truly about. Palmer says that vocation comes not from a voice out there calling me to be someone I am not. It comes from a voice in here calling me to be the person I was born to be. So before I can tell my life what I want to do with it, I must listen to my life telling me who I am. So I read that as part of a reflection on the scripture that I'm going to share in a moment. And the person, it was being quoted in this reflection, and they didn't like what Palmer said, but I loved it. I thought, I really get that. And I don't think it stops there, but it's a good place to start, because so much of what we often are told diminishes the internal of who we are from the beginning. So early on, I was taught directly and sometimes through what we call testimony or even personal account. And as people talked, I picked up on it early on in my own faith life that I was taught that anything God called you to was not fun. Miserable. It didn't come from your desires, it didn't come from your personality or your passion. That may not be part of it at all. It was imposed on you from the outside, and your obligation was to accept it, and if need be, suffer through it. I don't know how many stories of people who were on the mission field, or pastors, or just a number of folks whose story started, or even ended like that, of this idea that, I feel this God calling me to something, and I'm running from it. I ran from it because it was just not what they wanted. So that's what I was taught, and I know that I'm not alone. And it's a great example of how theology often pushes down the individual as if our own desires and our own dreams aren't valid. And the church too often teaches people not to trust themselves, not to trust your own voice, or even your feelings, and what your intuition or instincts are about something. And in doing so, we've lost the idea that we are important messengers. We are of God's love and justice way of life. Or even yet, many centuries ago, the church and other religious organizations created a professional class of people, which, Derek, now that's funny that I'm wearing my stole today. Which is like, okay, I was telling Derek I've been wrestling with the stole. I love my stole. Sarah Horton made it for me. I asked her to, and she made it. It was awesome. Thanks to the woman on Pinterest who had a picture of it, but we did it ourselves. But anyway, And I was telling Derek earlier, so I'm really wrestling with, well, why wear it? Is it say I'm set apart, I'm different, or whatever? But anyway, I haven't figured that out, but I like it. Okay, so, but centuries ago, the religious organizations created professional classes of people, clergy, most often, but not always, but these groups of folks created these professional classes to do the work. It was and is their responsibility to live a vocation, their responsibility to be on mission, theirs to do ministry, relieving anyone else from even considering that they are part of the mission of God to be loved in this world. That's the clergy's role, or the religious class's role. And over time, then, the church lost that powerful reality that the universal Christ is at work in the world in and through ordinary people. You see, it's the pastor's job, the clergy's job, the cloistered folks' job to do the work on behalf of the community. And it's the people's job to critique whether the pastor's doing it right. So this is that made me a little stressed. But anyway, but that scenario has led to toxic, practical application of bad theology affecting the church, its systems, and all of us. So we see in Mark's gospel that those who follow Jesus, there's a couple places in Mark, those who follow Jesus are sent out by Jesus. Ordinary fishermen, tax collectors, carpenters, folks doing their work, were sent out to work, to be useful, to join God on God's mission. And since that is the reality in the Gospels themselves, we can ask then, how did the church over those centuries start to focus on a sedentary faith response to the Christ? How did the church, and I'm not going to answer these questions, but how did the church ever get to the place where followers of this Jesus are not sent? Let me say that again, because I kind of flubbed my mouth there. They're not, that followers of Jesus are not sent, but are called to stay. Focus on inside matters of the perceived, what we call blessed, instead of outside matters of the, outsiders, who then often become identified as not blessed. So there's something in here that they need out there, and we go tell them what they need, and it's this one-way transaction and not a two-way relationship. So marvel at the wonder that Jesus sends ordinary people, not clergy, but ordinary people like us. Okay, I'm clergy, but like us to do his work in the world. So this clergy-focused model of religion that takes the power of vocation away from everyday folks has been around for way too long. There were several times that people who knew Jesus as an ordinary person became, the fact that they knew him as an ordinary person became an issue. Many people who had heard Jesus knew him and his family. And that was a problem for them, believing that he had anything to say to them. You can get that, right? There's a portion of Mark's gospel that begins with a kind of scoffing question. It's in chapter 4. The question is, who then is this? Referring to Jesus. Who is this? And then chapter 6 begins with a similar mocking question. Where did this man get all this? The crowds are having a tough time figuring out Jesus. Jesus, hometown boy in chapter 6, is dismissed by the home folk as only a tekton, in Greek, a carpenter or stonemason. So they listen to him and they witness Jesus' works, but they respond, where did this guy get all this? So rejected by his own family many times, even his mother, at least once we know, and the folks at his hometown synagogue, Jesus, who knows what rejection is like, directs his sent-out disciples toward the outsider in surrounding villages. So the outsiders were so often recipients of Jesus' compassion and his response because Jesus was an outsider. He knew what that was like. So here, these words, this part of Jesus' story in Mark chapter 6, where it says this: Jesus left there and went to his hometown, accompanied by his disciples. So when the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. There it is. Where did this man get these things? They asked. In other words, how is he saying all of this? We know him. What's this wisdom that has been given him? What are these remarkable miracles he is performing? And then they say, isn't this the carpenter? I mean, they knew it, right? Isn't this Mary's son? They watched him grow up. And the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon, they knew his family. Aren't his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him, it says. So Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor except in his own town, among his relatives, and in his own home. He could not do any miracles there except lay his hands on a few sick people and heal them. And he was amazed at their lack of faith. And then Jesus went around teaching from village to village, calling the 12 to him. He began to send them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority over impure spirits. These were his instructions. Take nothing for the journey except a staff, no bread, no bag, no money in your belts. Wear sandals, but not an extra shirt. Whenever you enter a house, stay there until you leave that town. And if any place will not welcome you or listen to you, leave that place and shake the dust off your feet as a testimony against them. That would be a great sermon on in and of itself sometime. I want to give you permission to shake some dust off. It's okay. Anyway, another day. They went out and preached that people should repent, and they drove out many demons and anointed many sick people with oil and healed them. So in this story, after experiencing resistance to his work and his message in his own hometown, Jesus regroups his movement and sends out his 12 disciples to preach good news and to represent the Christ in the world. Jesus sending these people is a bit of a surprise. I mean, after all, the disciples in Mark's gospel are not the sharpest people. They've been confused by Jesus nearly every step of the way. We can understand that. And yet Jesus sends them out in his name to do his work. So you and I, gathered here on this day, find our commission, our purpose, sometimes maybe even our identity and our vocation in this story. In a broad sense, we do. We are the latest installment in the story of the Christ sending unlikely folks, like Jesus did, into the world in his name. Now, all of the years, there have been over 30 now, I don't know how many, but over 30 that I have been preaching and sharing and writing and speaking to folks. I have absolutely loved throughout that time Will Willimon, who is a retired United Methodist bishop right now. I first heard of Will Willimon in some of his books. He was just a pastor. But anyway, then Will preached the ordination service for my deacon's ordination. And I just still remember that. And I've met him a couple of times. But anyway, Will, we're buds. But Will is just someone that I quote him, I read his stuff, I share it, and I'm going to do that again today. He tells this story, he wrote about this story from his own life that I want to share with you. So the first person reference in here is him. Okay? So I'll try to keep you on that track. So Williman says, at 10 years old, I was doing time in Miss McDaniel's 6th grade class. Dutifully copying words off the blackboard when I got the call. A note was delivered by one of the aides from the school office, and my teacher read the note and then called out, Williman, Mr. Harrelson, parenthesis, the intimidating, iron-fisted, ancient principal, wants to see you. Go to his office. Shaking with apprehension, I opened the desk, put away my things, and trudged toward the principal's office. Passing an open door, a classmate looked out at me with pity, praying, thank God it's him and not me. Listen carefully. I do not intend to repeat myself, said the principal, looking down at me. I mean, you just knew that. You go down Tyndall 2 blocks and turn left. Go 2 more blocks, number 15. I've got a message that's got to be delivered. You tell Jimmy Spain's mother, if he's not in school by this afternoon, I'm reporting her for truancy. So, this wasn't about me, Williman said. It was worse. God help me, he said. I'm actually seeing who's in the room. I think Lola can handle it. I'm going to use all the language that Will does. Okay. He says, God help me. Jimmy Spain, toughest bully of all the 6th grade. If we lived in a just world, Jimmy would have been in the 8th. And what in God's name is truancy, Will thought, as his 6th grade self. Somber thoughts tormented me as I journeyed down Tyndall, bidding farewell to the safety of the schoolyard, turned left, walked 2 more blocks, marveling that the world actually went on about its business while we were doing time in school. The last 2 blocks were the toughest. Descending into a non-nice part of town, unknown to me or any of my friends, a sad neighborhood behind the school. Number 15 was a small house, peeling paint, disordered yard, just the sort of house you'd expect Jimmy Spain to be holed up in, rough, sinister. A big blue Buick was parked in front, which was reassuring. And he said, as I fearfully approached the walk, a man emerged, letting the screen door slam as he stepped off the porch, adjusting his tie, stretching his suspenders, and lighting a cigar. Are you Mr. Spain, sir? As I said it, I remembered that everybody at school said that Jimmy was so mean because he didn't have a daddy. The man looked down at me, pulled his tie tight, and guffawed, Mr. Spain? Ha ha ha! Mr. Spain, my ass. He sent up a cloud of smoke, got into his car, and sped off. I stepped up on the rotten porch and tapped the soiled screen door. My heart sank. The door was opened by none other than Jimmy Spain. His steely green eyes enlarged when he saw me, startled as much by me as I was by him. Before Jimmy could say anything, the door was pulled back and a woman in a faded blue terry cloth bathrobe looked down at me over Jimmy's shoulder. What do you want? She asked in a cold, threatening way. I'm from the school. The principal sent me to, principal? What does that old fool want? He sent me so that we that everybody at school, that we all miss Jimmy. And we wish he were there today. What? She sneered, pulling Jimmy toward her just a bit. Well, it's like a special day today, and everyone wants Jimmy there. We're doing some special stuff. Everybody thinks it won't be as good if Jimmy is not there. At least I think that's what he said. Jimmy, the thug who could beat up any kid at Donaldson Elementary, even ninth graders, anytime he wanted, peered out at me in wonderment. Suddenly, this bully, feared by all, looked small, being clutched by his mother's protective arm, his eyes embarrassed, hanging on my every stammering word. Well, you tell that old man it's none of his damn business what I do with James. James, she said, looking down at him, you want to go to that old school today or not? Jimmy looked at me as he wordlessly nodded in assent. Suit yourself, get your stuff, take that $1 off the dresser to buy lunch. I ain't got nothing here. So in a flash, he was away and back. And his mother stood at the door and stared suspiciously, and after making the unimaginable gesture, giving Jimmy a peck on the cheek, she stood staring at us as we walked off the rotting porch, down the walk, and back toward Tyndall Avenue. And as we walked back to school, we said not a word. I had previously lacked the courage to speak to Jimmy, and Jimmy the tough had never had any reason, thank the Lord, to speak to me, both had said. So walking back to school that afternoon was not the time to begin. We walked up the steps of the school, took a right, and wordlessly turned toward the principal's office. Jimmy allowed himself to be led by me, and there I handed him off to the principal's secretary. For the first time, Jimmy seemed not mean and threatening at all, but small. And as the secretary led him away, Jimmy turned and looked back at me with a look of, I don't know, maybe regret, embarrassment, but it could have also been thanks, gratitude. That evening, when I narrated my day to my mother at supper, she exclaimed, "That is the most outrageous thing I've ever heard. Sending a young child out in the middle of the school day," this was a different day, a different era, out in the middle of the school day to fetch a truant. And on that street, Mr. Helston ought to have his head examined. Don't you ever allow anyone again to put you in that position, sending a child. And Wilman writes, but I knew that my mother was wrong. That day was the best day of my whole time at Donaldson Elementary. I didn't know yet about Mark chapter 6, about Jesus sending out his 12 disciples to do his work and to send his message out into the world, commandeering the lives of ordinary people and handing them outrageous assignments. Will wouldn't have gone to invite Jimmy to a special day at school on his own, even though he did make that up. But he would have avoided Jimmy at all costs. But someone called him, and yet this person presenting him with this opportunity was already in his everyday life. He didn't have to buy a ticket to go hear the principal speak. There was no tour that Eventbrite was involved in. He didn't have to go far out of his way to fulfill the mission that he was given. And he already knew Jimmy, too, every day at school. So everybody here this morning, in some way or another, has had Jesus say to you, in some way or another, you go down Tyndall 2 blocks and turn left. Go to the world in my name. Don't worry about your limitations or your weaknesses. I'm sending you out because God has a message that's got to be delivered, and you are just the person to do it. Thanks be to God. Amen. So I share with you some news for the community. First of all, I shouldn't start with this every time, but it's just the first thing I think of, and I ticked it off my list. The QR codes for giving, if you want to make a donation today at the Open Table, there's a QR code that you can do that with a checking account or a card through PayPal. Is back at the back. There's also a cash box if you want to give cash or a check. And we do that because people do actually do that. And then I wanted also to talk about next Sunday is October 23rd, our fourth Sunday, which is our Out on Mission Sunday, Mission Together. We are planning to meet, actually none of the details of the day, well, who cares? None of the details of the day have necessarily been planned yet, but we know we're going to meet at the Shaker Inn in Lebanon. Again, that's some of that is already on the event section of Breeze, but we will get more information out as the week goes on. So next Sunday, 10:30 at Shaker Motel, Shaker Inn in Lebanon, where Family Promise, formerly Interfaith Hospitality Network, is relocating to do their homeless ministry, or ministry to homeless families. And so we have a motel room, in case you don't know, motel room that among others who have adopted a motel room have redecorated it and painted and done all kinds of work. Kathy, I meant to ask you earlier, I'm just asking from everybody. Is that email you sent me gone out to everyone?
Yes.
All right, so if you haven't seen it, there's an email from Open Table that Kathy explains more of what has happened and the very last things we need to get done, and has some pictures that I want to say are just beautiful. Thank everybody here who's participated, and again, there's a few more things to do. Kathy, do you want to say anything more about it?
No, I'm still looking for a painter for touch-up.
Touch-up painter.
I'm ceiling mainly, so.
Yeah, okay. And it's not a lot, but it still needs done. So talk to Kathy if you can do that.
Green bed and look up all the citizen green.
Yeah, right. Well, I did not do that. I did trim the ceiling. So that's next Sunday. That's what we're planning to do. There'll be more around that, but I'll get that out to you. Also, been talking about the next Sunday is a fifth Sunday in the month, which is just a bye week. No, is when we do just something fun together. Which we always have fun together, but this is just a little different. We won't be here. Sometimes we are. We are meeting, and again, details will go out before that date. Derek and I just made all the plans this morning. It's all done. So it's all done. I had said something about needing a fifth Sunday committee, and we decided that was stressful, and we just decided. So anyway, the fifth Sunday this month is a fire pit at the Strawberry Hill Clubhouse, which many of you have been to many times. It's kind of a place we go often. And anyway, you'll hear more about food and what else is going to be happening. So that is on the 30th, and it is in the evening, and I can't remember the time, but it's like 5-ish, 5 o'clock. Thank you. I couldn't remember if it was 5 or 5:30. So we will not be here at 10:30. We'll be there at 5. Okay. All right. And then tomorrow at 7:15, I'm going to be at the Monkey Bar for whoever wants to show up. And, if there's someone who has not been in Open Table for a while, a lot of people in the last couple of years, life has changed, they've changed, we've changed. I read something recently that said that it is like having lived 10 years. That your personality changes have been about 10 years worth of life. So anyway, things happen, and Sunday morning has just changed for a lot of folks. So this is just another opportunity to gather. I'm going to do them from time to time at different places. To just say, hey, if you may not be able to come on Sunday morning, maybe that's not even important to you anymore, but you're part of our community, and so let's get together and just have a talk and drink. So now I will be having a song, and other people can have whatever they want, of course. But I'm saying you don't have to come. If alcohol is an issue or you don't like it like me, still come if you can. So that is tomorrow at 7:15. So, all right. What do you see? as we spend some time praying today, I want to ask if there are any needs, joys, concerns, anything you want to share with us.
If we could pray for, I have a coworker whose son told his parents that he was feeling like he might injure himself. And so I don't know what has come of that, but his name is Aaron. If we could pray for him and his family.
Pray for Aaron. Anyone else?
My friend Harriet is recovering from cancer surgery, and as she's in the hospital, she has been notified her brother-in-law is in ICU and very critically ill.
Is that the one
Tom.
who helped her a lot? Or son?
Tom, yes,
Yes.
Tom.
So a good friend of the Savages, Harriet, who is recovering from cancer surgery. Brother-in-law is also in ICU. Hers. Anybody else?
My friend Shannon's mom, Sandy, had a small stroke last weekend. She was trying to relocate her to an apartment downtown, so she's in a little bit of turmoil.
Okay. Sandy.
Sandy.
Small stroke. Anyone else? Let's pray. God, remind us that you measure our days not in the accumulation of status or wealth, not in success or skill, but in trusting you, knowing you. Help us to see all whom we encounter as part of your family, our community. Help us to see the stranger on the street or the familiar faces at work as lives to which you have connected us. And help us to know that faithfulness is seldom more prayer or more solitude or more work within the walls of a church building. Help us to know that faithfulness is giving you access to all that we are and all that we do, so that together we can do your work. Help us to believe that as we, I want to rephrase that from when I first read it. I'm going to say the whole thing again. Help us to know that faithfulness is giving you access to all that we are and all that we do, so that together we can realize that we are doing your work. Help us to believe that as we give you access to our lives, that every task we do and person we meet and place we go is your work. And remind us that the smallest thing we do may be the most important to you and to others. So help us to see as you see that all of our life is the Lord's work. We remember these who have been shared today. Others on our hearts that we don't even name because of many reasons. And we give you thanks for being present with us and them. Amen. Carrying a vision of creation healed and restored, we welcome all in the name of the Christ. Invited to the table where no one shall go hungry, we gather as the Christ's guests and friends. In Holy Communion, we are commissioned to feed as we have been fed, forgive as we have been forgiven, love as we have been loved. The open table speaks to this shining promise of barriers broken and creation healed. In the communion meal, wine poured out and bread that is broken, we remember the life of Jesus. And we remember not only the promise, but also the price that Jesus paid for who he was and for what he did and said and for the world's brokenness. So as we eat this meal, we taste the mystery of God's great love for us. And we are renewed in faith and hope. Amen. So everyone is invited to this table today. It is open and welcoming moment. And if you need gluten-free bread, there is that available right here. And this cup is available for you to dip in the bread into. If you'd rather have small packets for individual cup and bread, you can take those and go back to your seat. Otherwise, I think Kathy's helping me. She'll hold the cup and I will tear a piece of bread, dip it in, and hand it to you. You can eat both together. So again, as we come together today and listen to the music and participate in that, everyone is welcome.
Sometimes I get tired of walking through these ordinary days. If nothing else, I'll get to see you, even if we never speak. Though the harm of words, it's sometimes we don't quite know what they really mean. I don't know where. Stare up at the sky. I hope the days and clouds turn into something as they pass us by. Maybe you might settle for skies that fade and blue. I hope that you might settle for this love I have for you. I don't know where. Your love can make these things better. Your love can make these things better.
this day and this week. Be brave.
Because I am a child of God.
And be kind.
Because so